Welcome to the Sustainability Business Podcast, a show featuring conversations shaping the future of energy and sustainability.
Last year, the only reference for green taxonomy was the European Union. But now, look at all these countries.
Now that regions are developing individual taxonomies, a harmonization between them may ease the functionality.
The Sustainability Business Podcast is produced by Schneider Electric's Sustainability Business team.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of our latest podcast series, focused on the evolving world of corporate environmental, social, and governance ESG reporting. I am Rebeca Cruz Mendoza, sustainability consultant at Schneider Electric, and with me again today is my colleague and sustainability consultant, Emily Austin. Hi, Emily.
Hey, Rebecca. Thank you so much for setting up this discussion today.
You are welcome. In our last episode, Emily and I reviewed the definition of ESG and the 5 different types of ESG reporting institutions that businesses must know of. If you want to learn more about it, we will leave the link in today's show notes. In this episode, we will take a look at current ESG reporting regulations around the world. We will compare and contrast local taxonomies and pay special attention to TCFD, which is becoming the foundation of many reporting regulations. We will also share our view on how we imagine the future of ESG will look like.
I'm excited to dive back into the topic of ESG with you. But first, I wanted to point something out that's happened since we last spoke.
Oh, and what is it?
Do you know what Earth Overshoot Day is?
I have heard of it, but please can you enlighten us?
Sure. Overshoot Day means by that date, humans have used up all of the resources that the Earth can provide in that year. On the 28th of July this year, we had our earliest ever Earth Overshoot Day. We are pushing this date forward every year because we are over-consuming. If Earth Overshoot Day reaches the 30th of June, then we'll be using 2 times what the Earth can provide for us. For reference, 1971 was the last year that Earth Overshoot Day was near the end of the year. It was on Christmas Day, December 25th. Back to ESG, Earth Overshoot Day is the perfect example of why countries and companies need to report their impact and start enacting a roadmap to meet the Earth's needs for fewer demands on its resources.
That's a really great point, Emily. I think the fact that Earth Overshoot Day is becoming worse each year underscores that ESG reporting is a necessary way to bring greater transparency into the ways that businesses impact the Earth and people. Thankfully, we are in the midst of a big uptake in corporates adopting ESG reporting practices globally. And this brings us to taxonomy. Emily, can you tell us more about what is a taxonomy in the world of ESG?
Simply put, a taxonomy is a classification system. In the ESG context, you might have heard of it referred to as green taxonomy, sustainable taxonomy, or green finance taxonomy. These terminologies refer to the different classifications that countries and economic areas are developing to establish what activities they accept as green. Having a green taxonomy in place ensures that all companies operating within a country are following the same definition of what is classed as environmentally friendly within that country. Between 2019 and 2021, several countries and regions started developing their own green taxonomies, including Bangladesh, Russia, Malaysia, and the European Union. This year, 2022, is the first year for reporting on the EU green taxonomy. Also this year, new geographies are getting on board, like Colombia, and we've seen progress in other countries like Mexico, Canada, India, for example. In addition, some countries are developing transition taxonomies to help support the move towards a green taxonomy in areas that are traditionally not sustainable.
Interesting. But wait, what is the difference between a green taxonomy and a transition taxonomy?
A transition taxonomy is less aggressive than a green taxonomy. Considering what Canada and Japan are doing, this transition taxonomy is an exercise to define activities that are not yet green, but will be phased out when green alternatives are found. And on that topic, one thing in the EU green taxonomy, which was shocking to me and brought about a lot of controversy, is that nuclear and natural gas were declared as green. Until now, nuclear and natural gas were not considered green activities because of the dangers of nuclear waste and the carbon footprint of gas. However, in the green taxonomy, with no existing green alternatives currently, the Commission has recognised both of these energy sources as transitional economic activities until we find sources to put us on the path to net zero. In fact, a lawsuit has just been filed against the European Commission, arguing that this is not consistent with existing climate laws and goals, such as the Paris Agreement.
Oh, yes, I also saw this. In my view, this is one of the many challenges and debates that will start arising with taxonomies, but at least we are starting a conversation and questioning everything. But with natural gas, we will be labeled green forever, do you think?
Well, it's not been defined yet for how long these energy sources will be labeled green, but these systems should evolve, right? And adapt to the innovations in the energy market. Let's see what happens with hydrogen, for example.
Yes, hydrogen is a promising alternative, but let's see where the energy market needle points later. Okay, I get it. I guess the more countries adopt a green taxonomy, the more challenges come to surface and new ways of tackling them too. So green taxonomies are getting pretty widespread. These countries are starting to set the bar as to what is considered sustainable within their nations. I remember last year, the only reference for green taxonomy was the European Union. But now look at all these countries beginning their sustainability policy journey. Having a taxonomy to define green activities is a step forward in terms of alignment for companies as well. Because what we are seeing without a green taxonomy is that every business has its own definition about what is sustainable, and the definitions vary a lot, making it hard to compare one company's environmental performance to another's. Then this filters throughout the different stakeholders and emphasizes the importance of ESG reporting and prepares them for meeting regulations in other countries. So, Emily, the EU Green Taxonomy, have you read it?
Yes, I have read some of it, but it's really quite extensive. It requires a lot of focus, I'm not going to lie. But in general, it is pretty interesting. You can read it on the European Commission website. We can leave a link in the show notes if anyone's interested.
Yes, let's leave the link so that everyone can have a read of it and share their thoughts. So, have you read any other taxonomy from another country? And if so, are they similar, or in what ways do taxonomies differ from country to country?
I haven't personally read through any other region's green taxonomy, but interestingly, during COP26 in Glasgow, the EU and China presented a study where they compared their respective taxonomies. The primary purpose of the working group, called Common Ground Taxonomy, was to put forward commonalities from the EU and China's green taxonomies and provide generic methodologies for benchmarking these regulations. The analysis focused on climate change mitigation taxonomies as there is most overlap in this area. And the conclusion was that now that regions are developing individual taxonomies, a harmonization between them may ease the functionality for cross-border sustainable activities. For example, both EU and China taxonomies focus on tackling climate change. Both look at waste, energy, and industry as high priority areas, as well as construction and transportation. Within each activity, it's mentioned which taxonomy is more stringent, or if they're equal in ambition, or if there is little to no overlap. An example of this is in the generation of energy from wind and oceans. The EU and taxonomies here are well aligned, but in energy generation from hydropower, for example, the EU's criteria for this activity to be classed as green are much more stringent.
Oh, wow. That is such a good comparison. And I expected less differences between them, to be honest. But then, if these taxonomies are specific for each country, we still need something that is comparable around the world, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the exact reason that many are calling for a main body to regulate these definitions, similar to what the World Trade Organization does for product classification, whereby a pencil might be called a different word across different geographies, but it would have the same code to classify it. The same would happen with green taxonomies and companies reporting on them. In the end, companies might have sites all over the world. And when it comes to which taxonomy to follow, some sites might have stricter rules than others, making it a never-ending struggle. A global green taxonomy is exactly what we need to make realistic progress.
A green taxonomy that is globally agreed upon would make so much sense. But it's easier said than done, isn't it?
It is definitely easier said than done. However, we are seeing some signs that countries are converging on one set of guidance that could help to align reporting activities across these country lines.
And what would that be?
Have you heard of TCFD or the Taskforce on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures?
Right, I have. And I've seen that some countries like the United Kingdom, Japan, and New Zealand are beginning to issue requirements for certain organizations to make climate-related financial disclosures in line with TCFD. And I have also seen that many voluntary reporting frameworks like CDP, Science-Based Targets, GRI, SASB, and others are collaborating to align with TCFD principles.
Yeah, I'm seeing that too.
But why is this? What makes TCFD so popular these days among other frameworks and regulations? Why is it driving convergence in corporate reporting?
That is a really good question, Rebecca, and one that many of our customers are also asking us. So diving a bit into TCFD, let's start with the strengths of the framework. First and foremost, TCFD is investor focused. The guidance speaks the language of the financial markets, making it stand out from other existing environmental reporting frameworks. TCFD pushes companies to look at not only the external impacts on the environment by the company, but also the potential financial impacts within the company due to the physical and transition risks posed by climate change.
Okay, this makes sense because we know investors have become increasingly interested in a business ESG performance. Remember that letter from the CEO of BlackRock to its stakeholders? And investors, of course, care about the bottom line of the companies they invest in. Climate change has such drastic impacts on the land, our natural resources, and our communities that putting this potential risk into financial terms must motivate companies and their investors to really pay attention, right?
That's exactly it. TCFD isn't just about risk, doom and gloom, though. It also allows companies and investors to think about opportunities presented by climate change too. Climate adaptation and business model evolution can also present openings to innovate and bring new ideas to market, which is motivating businesses in an entirely different way.
Very true. I like looking at it from both sides of the coin like that. TCFD is clearly future-oriented, which differentiates it from other ESG reports that focus on looking at climate impacts that have already occurred. So what else do we like about TCFD?
Yeah, the forward-looking aspect certainly does make it stand out. On top of introducing climate risks and opportunities, TCFD also looks at scenario analysis, which is quite new and revolutionary in the ESG landscape. Finally, it aligns well with greenhouse gas accounting and disclosure, including PCAF, the Partnership for Accounting Financials. It also supplements other ESG-related standards, such as CDP, SASB, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. To be clear, however good this might sound, the perfect guideline does not exist yet. TCFD also has its challenges. For example, taking into account that TCFD is all about the strategy of companies towards climate change, measuring risks and opportunities. What I have seen is that not many companies are prepared for that. Take, for example, startups or small companies, they're barely beginning their sustainability reporting journey. So for them, TCFD might seem like a gigantic wave to surf. There's also a lot of preparation to be done before the reporting can begin. TCFD also lacks a wider focus in the social aspect of ESG, which might be an important pillar for some entities. But the overall consensus forming around it gives us a hint at what universal reporting standard might look like in the future.
The elusive idea of universal reporting. Humor me and let's think about how the perfect guideline would look like. If we could design a universal reporting standard, what do you think would look like?
That is a big ask, but sure, let's dream for a moment.
Let's discuss this, remembering that current challenge is for both reporting entities, so companies, and those reading the reports.
Sure. An ideal change that would benefit companies is the convergence of all existing standards information in one place. This reduces the reporting effort for the company. Right now, companies report following various different guidelines. This is usually done within the various frameworks or a company's own Frankenstein-like sustainability report. Why not combine it all into one universal framework so that the data is only reported once in one place, accessible to everyone?
Yes, because currently they are reporting in several different places, even with some overlapping info. And for the readers, this is a challenging task because they will have to visit different databases such as CDP, Women Business, or the company's own website and reports to get the information that they need.
Exactly. Personally, I have experienced that, and it is very time consuming. I was thinking another ideal scenario would be a reporting standard that is extendable. For example, if stakeholders want to report or collect data on something that is not already within the standard, they can request edits to capture optional extra data. Existing reporting standards don't cover everything investors want to see. This was our conclusion from our last episode. For example, if one company started to report on the employees' well-being and mental health scores, another company might see that and also want to report on that aspect.
That makes sense, because if something is important for one company's stakeholders, the same information could be important for others.
Exactly. Another aspirational element of a universal reporting standard that we would support is the ability to collect data points in real time and in a single universal space. Using a standardized software to collect data would seriously reduce man hours, and the comparison and reviewing of companies would be able to be completed immediately in real time, not just looking backwards at the last complete year.
Real-time reporting of data is a good one. Another I thought of is clearly defined metrics and comparability year over year. Currently, with having so many different standards, that is not easily comparable. Having clearly defined metrics throughout the universal standard for every company to report against will allow for better tracking of performance and benchmarking against other companies.
Agreed on that point. What should the universal standard focus on? TCFD has a big focus towards finance, clearly, but is it better to focus on environmental and social impacts? A universal standard should really address both of these aspects, both finance and ESG, therefore having double materiality.
Yes, or even better, the concept of dynamic materiality, which would put an emphasis on the fact that today's understanding of what is likely to impact a business is not static. A dynamic approach to materiality illustrates the interplay between environmental and social issues with financial materiality and revisits these measures frequently.
Good point. I could go on and on about this. For example, there are also so many considerations about how to handle the disclosures by sector and how a universal standard would manage that. But what I think is most important is that a universal standard informed by a globally accepted taxonomy would remove the cumbersome reporting burden and overlapping disclosures that corporates are doing today by consolidating all of that information.
And by doing so, it will help investors make informed decisions based on comparable ESG performance across companies, without needing to look at hundreds of reports and questionnaires. But well, Emily, that's what we think. But what do you reckon our listeners want from a universal ESG standard?
Okay, challenge accepted. Let's find out.
Take it to LinkedIn, listeners. We want to hear your ideas of what an ideal reporting standard would look like. Do you agree that a global taxonomy and universal reporting framework could solve some problems? Do we really have it with TCFD? Or is there something else that you would like to see in the future of ESG? Connect with us on LinkedIn and let us know what you think. And for now, thank you for listening and stay tuned for our next episode. We'll share your thoughts on universal reporting and deep dive into a new aspect of the world of ESG reporting.
Thanks for joining this episode of the Sustainability Business Podcast. You can find the Sustainability Business on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter at Schneider Electric Sustainability Business, or dive into our blogs at perspectives.se.com. To keep up with the latest market news, please sign up for our Perspective Pulse email newsletter.